Let's talk Someone Six Sports. Today I have a special guest from Buffalo Fanatics, Clay Troia. How are you tonight?
I'm good, man. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show. We've been talking about this for a little while now, so thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, man. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good so far.
It's good to hear. Good to hear.
What was the big moment for you during the game on Sunday?
For me, I'm not sure if there was any one particular big moment. It was kind of overall, it was kind of a slower paced game. The Bills kind of kept on stalling out. The Jerry Hughes interception, that was a pretty big moment, kind of sealed the deal for us at the end. So if there was one moment in itself, I think that would probably be the biggest one, just because it was a pretty stressful game. Kind of all the way throughout, just because the Bills couldn't get in the end zone and they didn't really take the lead. I don't think it was until the third quarter, late in the third quarter, that they finally took the lead for the first time. So kind of to be able to have Jerry Hughes seal the deal there, get a nice little tip ball fall right in his lap. I'd say that was probably the most exciting for me. Is the biggest sigh of relief. It's kind of at that point I could take a deep breath and be like, oh, okay, this one's over and we can move on to the next week now. So
Um, like the biggest moment for me during that game was when Jerry Hughes got the interception and like it kind of ended the game there um and then the when Trent Murphy got a sack on Sam Darnold there.
yeah, that Trent Murphy sack was nice. It was cool. AJ Epinesa was in on that one too. I think it was pretty cool to kind of see both of the DNs converge on him there, especially since the pass rush has been a little bit lacking. So that was pretty cool to see. I agree.
What do you think the Bills can do better on defense or offense?
On defense, I'll start on defense because I definitely think there's things that they could be doing better on both sides of the ball. But I think starting off on defense, the run defense has been a pretty big issue so far. They and not even so much the run defense. I would say the defensive line play as a whole. I think they did kind of step up last week. It was nice to see that some of the guys were getting into the backfield there, and they were making a little bit of noise. They got some tackles for loss, a couple sacks finally, so it was good to see that going. But I think overall the front seven guys have really kind of struggled a little bit, and I know there's been a lot of injuries to the linebackers and some of the to the D line as well. They've kind of just tried to do a lot of switching up there, I think, because of that lack of production. But yeah, I would say overall, the defensive line play has been kind of lacking. I'd like to see one guy kind of step up, maybe Jerry Hughes kind of stepping up in yesterday's game, being AFC player of the week, AFC defensive player of the week this week. Maybe that'll get a little bit of momentum for those defensive line guys, and get them get them a little amped up, make them hungry out there, because I think that was probably the weakest part of the defense. On the offense, the offensive run game has really been the biggest struggle. And again, against the Jets, it did get a little bit better, but of course, it's against the Jets, so it's hard to kind of see if that's really something that's measurable, just because they're not probably the worst team in football at the moment. But it was definitely interesting to see, and I think that you know, they got to get Devin Singletary some space. The offensive line has really been lacking in the run blocking. I think there's been a lot of issues with the guard play. Hopefully, with John Feliciano, he's finally going to be coming back this week. He's on the active roster finally, so hopefully him being in there is kind of like a little bit of a spark to that offensive line, and hopefully they can start to open it up a little bit more. Take Brian Winters off the field because he's been kind of a big issue there. So hopefully, it kind of feels like the Bills are headed in the right direction right now, with people coming back off injury and some guys stepping up here and there in the areas that they were playing a little bit weaker.
Yeah, my favorite player plays defense. Um,
Who's your favorite player?
uh, Tremaine Edmonds.
Big Tremaine fan, huh? He's
Yeah,
pretty good. He's a big dude. He's a beast. His name hasn't been popping up as much in a positive way this year, but I think having Matt Milano back, and maybe if the defensive line play really affects how the linebackers are. So I've been a big fan of Tremaine since he came out, and hopefully he can still learn. He's still a super young linebacker, even though he's been in the league for this is third year in the league, and he's still a super young guy. So he has a lot of room to learn still, and I think that he still can be kind of the player that the Bills want him to be in the end.
do you think the Bills should get a pass rusher on deadline day?
I think in the pass rusher would be pretty big. I know we saw a couple of guys have already been kind of shifted around a little bit. But to me, the biggest problem is the salary cap that the Bills have, because a lot of those big premier pass rushers, they also come with the caveat of a big contract as well, and the Bills don't really have a lot of free space in their cap to allow themselves to trade for those guys. So I think if they do want to make a big move like that, they're going to have to move some other guys around as well. If they can get rid of Trent Murphy on a trade, I think probably getting rid of Trent Murphy via trade would be a bigger move than actually getting someone else in. And even if they do get rid of Trent Murphy, that could be a good opportunity for, Brandon Beane to go out and say, okay, we got a little bit of extra money to work with. Let's go out and get somebody that can help us win football games this year. What about you? What do you think? Do you think do you want to see them go out and get anybody at the trade deadline?
Probably like someone from maybe like Minnesota or something to play defense.
Yeah, definitely. I could. I don't know. I don't know. For me, it's been hard to keep track of. I don't know if there's anyone I have specifically in mind that I think that would be a good person for them to bring in, especially because of the contract. But Brandon Bean, I trust him. I know that he's the kind of guy that'll always look for ways to make the team better and pick up those guys that'll make the team better. And even in the offseason, he was saying he was looking to try to get Diggs at the trade deadline last year. So maybe it might not happen this year, which is kind of what happened with Diggs. Maybe he'll be looking for someone now, but won't happen till the offseason, or things might fall through. But he's definitely looking around. I have faith that if he thinks there's a guy out there that can help him, he's going to explore every option to see if he can get him on the team.
Yeah, I think Trent Murphy's like one of those guys that's been having like his ups and downs in the during the season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I don't think Murphy's a bad player. I don't think he gets a lot of hate on social media. I don't think he's a bad player. I just think he is making too much money for the amount of production that he's able to do. If we had him on a cheaper contract, I think he would be a great guy to keep, because if he was not taking up as much of the cap space, he could be pretty valuable. We saw him get a sack last week, and he can make big plays, but when he's taking up that much cap space and there's not as much of a payoff on the field, that's kind of why I think a lot of the analysts, a lot of the media guys are saying we got to get rid of him, just because he's eating up way too much money right now.
Do the Bills need a veteran kicker?
I don't think they do. And I think, a lot of people up until last week, I think, were a little bit worried about Tyler Bass. I was worried about Tyler Bass because I wasn't really sure how he was gonna do. And when there's a rookie kicker, there's no preseason. It's kind of hard to know what you're gonna get out of that guy. And really, the only way to kind of tell if he is going to be able to make it in the league is in training camp and in practice, and that's just not the same as a game situation. So to me, I think not having that, excuse me, extra amount of practice, not having that in the preseason this year, kind of made everybody a little bit more worried. But I think after the last game, against the Jets, he made 6 field goals. So he showed that he can kick the ball, and he's kicking it from both hashes too, which I know a lot of people were a little worried because he's had some struggles kicking it from the right hash, but he made a couple from the right hash, and he actually missed one from the left, which is where he's a little more comfortable. I mean, every kicker's going to miss a few kicks, but I think that was probably a big confidence boost for Bass last week was making all those kicks. And confidence is a big part of special teams and of kicker play. So I think getting that confidence for him definitely should help him out in the future. Hopefully he can kind of carry that momentum throughout the rest of the season and just keep on building his confidence up.
I've been a a Bass fan for a while um since like the Bills drafted him and stuff, and I think that maybe if um they they give him enough time to um get get used to being in the NFL and just getting some games under him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that was kind of his biggest problem before is maybe he didn't have that confidence, and just because he didn't have that experience kicking in the NFL, and we've seen good kickers before, good rookie kickers come in. Roberto Aguayo came in from out of Florida State to go kick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he just he didn't have what it took to make those plays. Or to make those kicks when he was in the NFL, even though he was a great college kicker. So I think it's always kind of a little nerve wracking to see what happens when these guys come into the league and how they're going to be able to handle it and how they're going to be able to do when they're making those kicks at the biggest stage. But I think definitely it's the more experience that he gets making kicks in the NFL, the better he's going to get. I think because he's got a strong leg and he can hit it from anywhere on the field really. So he'll be an asset if he can figure out how to be a little more consistent with his accuracy. And I think that's something that he'll be able to figure out now that he's got a little bit of that confidence here.
How do you think Bass and the special teams will do this year during the season?
Yeah, so I mean, special teams has kind of been it's an interesting one because going into the season, we knew Andre Roberts was an asset, and then his average return is best in the league, and it has been for a while. So we knew that he was going to be good, but then he kind of had that setback game against the Titans where he fumbled the ball. There was a tip pass on offense for him that ended up being an interception. So we it was kind of saw a little bit of setback from him, and I was very frustrated there because I've always been a very big defender of Andre Roberts because I think he is an asset to have on the special teams. And then when he was making mistakes like that were pretty game changing, it was pretty tough to watch. But I think that in the kicking game, Bajorquez is exceeded all expectations for me this year because the past couple of years for him have not been pretty. He's had a couple bad punts here and there, and really his play was just kind of overall really inconsistent. So I think it was good to see him come in this year, and he hasn't had as many punts this year, which has been nice because the offense has really stepped it up and they've done a lot better. But I think his play's been exceptional. He's hit like a 70+ yard punt at this point, and maybe it just goes along with a little bit of confidence. His first couple of kicks were good, and after that, he's off to the races. Kicking it deep. And then yeah, with Bass, kind of maturing as a kicker, I think the special teams is in a pretty good position. But Jorquez and his holding is a little bit concerning sometimes. We saw Bass kicking the laces a couple times. So hopefully he can figure that out. Holding's hard. It's a really high stress job. And when you do it right, nobody cares. But when you do it wrong, everybody notices. So it's a very high pressure thing to do. And hopefully, he's been doing good with his punts. So hopefully now he has a little bit extra time to practice his holding.
What do you think of Isaiah McKenzie?
Yeah, so Isaiah McKenzie, I was a pretty big fan of him too. And I think when the Bills first signed Andre Roberts, I was a little confused because I was like, why do we need Andre Roberts? We've got Isaiah McKenzie, who's a solid returner. I was wrong because Andre Roberts is very good. I do like McKenzie and how they use him in on the offense. Brian Dable's been very creative with getting him the ball and getting him in space, especially on those jet sweep plays, those little the small pitch forward that Josh does to him. He's been effective with those. He's gotten touchdowns on those plays, and that's because it's a real off pace play. You don't really expect a guy with his speed to be coming along the line of scrimmage like that. So I do like the way that he's used in the offense. I think he's kind of a specialty player where it's he's not going to be able to be on the field on every play, but when he is on the field, you got to watch out for him. And Dable's been doing a really good job of sending him on some interesting motions where he'll come into the backfield and then turn around and go right back out like he's going to get the pitch, or it's going to be uh, a triple option type of a play. So I think I like the way that Dable uses him, and I think because of that, it makes him an asset too. So credit to Dable there for seeing McKenzie's skill set and then being able to apply that to the playbook.
I asked this question yesterday on the Ranting Ron show. How do you think Devin Singletary is going to be used during the season?
Yeah, Singletary has been kind of a disappointment so far this year. I don't really think that that's been Singletary's fault. I think that goes a lot more on the offensive line. I think the poor offensive line play has kind of stunted his growth a little bit as a running back in the NFL. Because I do think he is good. He's very quick. He's not really the guy that can break tackles too much, is as far as a physicality standpoint goes, but he's very quick, very agile. He can make any guy miss in a telephone booth because he's so quick and shifty like that. So I think hopefully, like I said, with Feliciano coming back, and with a little bit of an extra confidence boost from playing against the Jets, I'm hoping that was kind of a reset button, and now they can kind of take things where they left off, and maybe start calling a few kind of different runs for him to be on, because he had success last year. And I think we were all a little disappointed when we didn't see that success continue early in the season. But I have faith in Dable. I know he is able to make adjustments. I just think it takes him a couple games sometimes. I think that's what happened with the pass game, which is why we lost to the Titans and the Chiefs, but those are two of the best teams in the league right now. So just because we lost to the Chiefs and the Titans doesn't mean that the offense is bad necessarily, that the run game was bad. But there are other teams that the run game is ineffective against as well. So I'd like to see I'd like to see Dable maybe make those adjustments a little bit faster, or at least before the season ends at all. I'd like to see something going on with the run game there.
What What do you think of Zach Moss so far this year?
Yeah, Zach Moss has been pretty quiet, just because he got a few touches early, and then he kind of got that toe injury and turf toe. That's hard for a running back because you gotta you're putting a lot of weight on the balls of your feet there when you're making cuts and everything. So that's a tough injury to overcome when you're a running back in the NFL. I think he's a good athlete. Going back and watching some of his college stuff, he's a great athlete. If you want to try and tackle him, he'll make you pay. If it's one on one, he's not the kind of guy that'll try to juke around you too much. He's just gonna run right through you if it's just you and him out there on the field. So we saw a little bit of that. He had kind of a nice little off tackle run where he was able to get down the field a little bit. And then there he ran into a defensive back, and he lowered his shoulder and hit him. So that's the kind of thing that we expected to see from Zach Moss, and hopefully he can, break out a little bit more. And it's kind of probably the same thing really as kind of with Bass, being a rookie. The more touches he gets, the more confidence he's going to get. And if he can get those positive yardage, if he can, make a big hit on a defender, something like that, it's going to be a huge boost to his confidence, and he'll probably just keep on playing better from there.
How do you think our defense will finish the season?
Yeah, so the defense has kind of been the biggest question mark so far, which was a surprise to pretty much everybody that follows football, and not just Bills football, because over the past 2 seasons, the Bills defense has been a top 5 defense, and it's kind of been the offense that's been holding them back from really being a superstar team. So I think they have the ability there. There are a couple guys missing now, Lorenzo Alexander, Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, those guys are gone, but there's still good talent that they've brought in. At the linebacker position, I'm not sure if they've really been able to replace Lorenzo Alexander just because he's such a unique talent. He's a bigger guy he can play linebacker. He can drop into coverage sometimes, but the way that he would play the run and the way he could rush the passer was both so impressive that it's hard to find a guy who can do both of those things effectively. So I think replacing him is just a tall task in itself. But Mario Addison, he came in, Jefferson, he came in. Those are guys that we brought in to replace those players that that you expect to be performing well and at a high level. So yeah, I mean, I think they'll be able to come around, and they'll be able to finish strong. Just because Sean McDermott is a brilliant mind at the head coach position, and he's a defensive minded coach. Leslie Frazier's a good coach. Maybe he's struggled to understand his position group or his new players. Maybe he's had a little bit of trouble kind of understanding what their strengths are and how to play to their strengths. I'm not really a defensive minded guy myself, so it's kind of hard for me to go in and watch the film and say, oh, this is what's going on. But they have good players. They have a good locker room, a lot of confidence. I think that, and there's plenty of time to turn it around as well. You can play bad in the first half of the season and still win a Super Bowl. And I'm not saying the Bills are going to do that, but if they're able to make the proper steps and improve at a pretty high rate, really, at this point, because there's a lot of good competition this year, they might be able to win a couple playoff games, and it's all they got to do is just get there. And then if they can make the adjustments once they get in the playoffs, then it's a whole different story.
Thank you for watching this edition of Let's Talk 716 Sports. Thank you to my guest, Clay Troia, for coming on and talking Bills football.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Robbie. I appreciate it.